So this is a schematic of our system overview. You can pause to examine this some more if you'd like. This is in our report. And here's the schematic of our real-time clock, or how those real-time clock interrupts go. And now onto our design demo, process, and evolution. Hi, so this is the original design for the BirdBox, and as you can see this is like a special feeding funnel to fill up bird feeders actually. But we thought the sideways method would work pretty well, and we'd have a slit so that the feed comes out whenever this rotates over that. But we realized that it kind of acted like a centrifuge, and when this thing spins really fast, it flings stuff everywhere. So like I had like a makeshift cover, but then we realized that the better part of the design was really just the fact that it could be like a centrifuge, and that if we had a design more like that, which is what we ended up doing, that we would have a better output than this. Even though it has a little bit more friction on the thing or on the motor, it was resolved by having a higher voltage into the motor. So there you go. Alright, so here's a deconstruction of the original design. As you can see, we drilled in the holder for the motor, and then we had the motor kind of sitting in there while this could spin around. Yeah, it was obviously very rudimentary, but luckily we were able to complete this later on with 3D printing and modeling. Yeah. So here's the first prototype using the centrifuge and top-down design. You can see there are a couple of 3D printed parts, but this was just to see that it would work, right? And so that LED blinks at the interval that we turn the motor on, or the centrifuge on. Here it is in action from the top-down view. So one functionality we wanted was that when you press the second switch, as long as you're holding it down, it'll be feeding, which is the observed behavior here, but we'll go into more detail about that in a little bit. So the basic steps to get this to work are you just load the funnel, and you program the board with the time interval you wish to choose, and the board will essentially activate that centrifuge at that time interval, and it keeps real time. So we have a few different levels of interrupts. So it has a real-time clock, so it's extremely accurate with when you decide your time interval should be. And then there it is pouring out the rice. And it also has interrupts for that SW2 switch that we demonstrated earlier. But the SW2 switch interrupt is a lower level interrupt than the periodic interrupt, so that regardless of whether anyone's pressing that button, the birds will always get fed at least the amount that you had programmed them to be fed. Within our program, the user specifies the second, minute, and hour they wish, for the period of feeding, right? And so they don't have access to milliseconds because we have a third interrupt that checks whether we've hit the right time, and it's in milliseconds, but it's slightly less than a second, so that it's guaranteed that we hit every single period needed, and so that we don't just jump too many seconds such that this interrupt won't trigger. So notice in this clip you have the LED from the button press, the LED from the timer there, and then the LED from the button press again. I wanted to mention that for this project, one of the harder aspects was the circuitry. So we needed to make it so that the board could allow for the external battery to power the motor without the board having to supply any of that voltage itself, because otherwise that creates a lot of issues, as we discovered. And so here's our final circuit, which, thanks to Michelle, we implemented in our design. So here's a little overview of our 3D model, but the crucial part is that you have this ramp for the seeds, and you have this little space inside the ramp, this cavity, for the motor to be threaded through, so that we can have the centrifuge design. Here is the final 3D printed model. As you can see, you have the funnel at the top that encloses very well with the rest of the structure, and you have the little plate that acts as the centrifuge. There it is spinning. Very nicely. It's got a nice rumble. And so we imagine that if you put, obviously you load your seed of choice, you load into the program the time that you'd like, the time interval that you'd like, and you have to account for when you press the reset button. So let's say if you wanted to go at 10, you'd load a 2-hour time interval and you'd reset it at 8 or whatever. And then you put the rest in some sort of weatherproof enclosure, and you have a fully functioning automatic bird feeder, as we intended. So that's our project. Thanks for watching. This was the automatic bird feeder. Have a nice day.